We've now had 2 years of the Biden presidency, and it's time to take stock of some of his policies, like his stance on illegal immigration. Do you want to know what voters think? Well, we asked them. Is the current situation with migrants at the U.S.-Mexico border a crisis? 69% of voters said yes, and only 19% of voters said no. I'm surprised, but also a very high 12% said not sure. Men and women answered about the same. Younger voters were 16 points less likely to say yes than older voters, but still 58% of them said yes, and only 27% said no. But let's look at race. 73% of white voters said yes, but actually black voters were the least likely to say yes. One of our longtime sponsors, Roy Beck at Numbers USA, wrote a great book called Back of the Line, with a link in the description, that makes a stunning case that black Americans far and away are the most negatively affected by illegal immigration. And yet they were the least likely to say that the situation at the border is a crisis. Hispanic and other race voters poll closer to white voters than black voters, and are only slightly less likely to say that the border situation is a crisis than voters overall. Republicans' minds are made up, with 83% saying it's a crisis and only 4% saying not sure, but 12% of them say it isn't a crisis, showing that there really are some open border Republicans. Democrats and independents also think it's a crisis, but by a lower margin and with a much higher level of not sures than Republicans. But here are the numbers by Biden approval. 94% of those who strongly disapprove of Biden say the border is a crisis, showing that his immigration policies are most likely one of the main reasons that voters disapprove of him. But 43% of those who strongly approve of Biden also think the border is a crisis, a plurality. Why do they still strongly approve? Well, let's get to the next question. Do you agree or disagree with this statement? There's a crisis at the border because the Biden administration has refused to enforce immigration laws and finish the wall. Now, first up, this is a quote by the newly sworn into office Republican Senator from Missouri, Eric Schmitt. 62% of voters agree with him, including 50% who strongly agree. Only 34% disagree, 24% strongly. We don't have time to hit all the demographics, but it's important to note that even though white voters most strongly agree with Eric Schmitt about Biden's lack of enforcement, Hispanic and other race voters are, by a 6-point margin, most likely to at least somewhat agree. How many Democrats agree with this Republican sentiment? 41%, 27% of whom agree strongly, but 52% disagree. 86% of Republicans agree, but 11% don't. But let's look at independents. 61% agree, and only 35% don't. So Biden is picking up quite a bit of blame here, even among Democrats. But look at these numbers again by Biden approval. 69% of voters who strongly approve of Biden disagree with this statement, 61% strongly. So Biden's strongest supporters are mixed on whether the border situation is a crisis, and regardless, only 25% of them say that what is happening down there is because of his refusal to enforce immigration laws and complete the border wall. Digging deeper, 21% of those who think the border situation is a crisis disagree that it's Biden's fault, and 26% of those who think it is not a crisis still blame Biden for his lack of enforcement. But speaking of blame, how do voters rate the way Biden is handling immigration issues? 10% say excellent, 30% say excellent or good, and 51% say poor. This is his lowest rated issue, and although these numbers aren't the lowest he's ever received on immigration, they're just as low as when we last asked it in the summer. But what's important to note is that his approval rate has actually risen a few points since then, and his rating on immigration has not. The crosstabs are really interesting, but you'll have to be a paid platinum subscriber to see them all. But here's party. 11% of Republicans say good or excellent. Again, party lines are somewhat blurring, and there really are some open border Republicans, most likely younger, less informed, or higher income ones. Also, his rating among independents are abysmal, with 21% giving him an excellent or good, and 54% a poor. But Democrats are pretty happy, though 22% do say poor, which is actually a bit more than the 13% of Democrats that strongly disapprove of him in today's numbers. But again, all the action is in Biden approval. He gets a combined 0% excellent and good from those who strongly disapprove of him, and a combined 73% from those who strongly approve. Add in the fair rating, and he's up to 91% among his strongest supporters. His somewhat approves basically refuse to give him an excellent rating, but they aren't giving him a poor really either. So Biden's supporters, again, are kind of mixed on whether the border is a crisis, but they're leaning that way. From our November exit polling, we know as well that a sizable minority of Democrats actually support policies that favor illegal immigration. And his supporters, whether the border is a crisis or not, by a strong majority, do not put the blame on his lack of enforcement. Fascinating stuff, considering the repeated migrant caravans and uncomfortable pictures of people huddled under overpasses. But maybe the only thing his supporters saw was the image of him standing by Trump's border wall. I have a hunch that the mainstream media is a missing variable in this equation. If you think the same thing, then you should subscribe to our channel so you won't miss our important truths about American public opinion. Please hit the like button and drop your opinions in the comments as well, and thanks for watching.